Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, yeah, got some great speakers, got some insights to share with you, hopefully some good conversation and questions, and obviously welcome any questions from you guys. So basically, I just wanted to reflect on what an incredible year it's kind of been, one that I'm sure none of us will ever forget. And obviously, we've seen people, businesses, cultures, change more drastically than we've ever seen before. But obviously it's been hard, but we've endured, we've evolved, and as a kind of species, we survive. And we've had to adapt, in a really short space of time. And I think it's been quite incredible how we're able to adapt, in terms of our lives, our businesses, how we can change. And hopefully, if this year was all around survival, then it'd be nice to think that next year is all about the rebuild. And that's what I'd like to sort of focus as much of this session today on. Is kind of having that positivity and thinking, how can we rebuild? So yeah, we're going to be looking at that. This year, I represent a business development community, and I'm really proud to sort of have launched that earlier this year, called BD Matters. And I think, business development people are going to be at the heart of that rebuild. You're going to need a lot of positivity, intuition, creative salespeople that are going to fight for every inch, and hopefully that will rub off on the rest of agency land. And we've continued, as Grey Matters and BD Matters, we've continued to grow and build more knowledge and skills. And I see, the whole kind of business development space, I think it's becoming more sophisticated. I think the discipline is more being seen as a more desirable career path, and these are all sort of really important values to me. It's why I launched BD Matters, and that's sort of grown to over 200 people in just a short space of time. So that's going to evolve, and we're sort of doing surveys. We're delving into the psyche of business development people, and building a recruitment platform off the back of that. And also alongside, BIMA with Holly, I'm co-leading their new business community. So it seems like quite an exciting time for BD people, especially, in the next 12 months. So today I'm joined by four of some of the most connected agency people in the UK, and spanning literally sort of thousands of agencies up and down the country. And hopefully, you'll recognize the names in Pimento, the DBA, ALF, Insight, and BIMA. So I've asked representatives from each of those to join us, and share a few sort of learnings, few insights, and answer some of my questions. So we've got Adam Fenello, who's the head of services at DBA. We've got Amanda Ruddy, who is head of sales at ALF Insight, Holly Hall, who's MD at BIMA, and Stephen Knight, founder and CEO at Pimento. So I think we'll delve in. I have been, as I think one of the guests mentioned earlier, I've been doing Movember, not anymore, but I thought every time we mentioned the word pivot, that we might chuck another £10 into the pot and put it towards Movember. And I've got a live poll, mostly just fun questions, to be honest, nothing too serious. It's the last event of the year. We're all bloody exhausted. Let's just have a laugh at it. And if it all goes tits up, what the hell? So let's do it. So let's jump in. You've each sort of done your own bits of research at different times this year. So I'll start with you, Holly, if that's all right, unless you say no, which you're more than welcome to do.
Absolutely fine.
We'll start. You said, I think it's the state of the digital industry. Have I got that right?
Yes, well done. Yeah, we surveyed both agencies and clients back 2-3 months ago now. We launched the report about 6 weeks ago. It's very hard. Time in 2020 has been very, very weird. But ultimately, the aim of it was to understand what both agencies and clients were going through, and what they saw their next kind of 3 to 6 months looking like, the challenges that they were facing, and to basically bring those two together. So the idea is that there's lots of advice in there around, okay, what do agencies need and what do clients need to go forward and help navigate what is going to be, a difficult next kind of 6 months. So it it's quite a hefty report. I'm going to pull out like 3 kind of key learnings, but I would say go and download it, because it breaks up small, medium, large agencies and clients, and there's lots of advice in there. So I guess, and as well, this is my perspective, you know, you might pull out totally different things. So for me, I think, you know, some of these are really obvious, but sometimes they're the most important things that you overlook. So when we asked clients about their most attractive partners, 44% said those that demonstrate relevant case studies with clear ROI. So immediately off the back, it's just, you know, be really clear on your value and your point of difference, because that has been absolutely was the most priority for clients. Secondly, 23% said that those, you know, they valued those that had been recommended by a trusted peer. And I know we've certainly, you know, seen that demand and engagement for things has, you know, gone skyrocketed. And it just, you know, it's really important, therefore, to be, you know, to be keeping all of those connections really healthy, to be part of networks, you know, to look after your existing clients, to look after old ex-clients, those clients that never quite made it as clients, you know, having that really strong network that can then recommend you and will, you know, fight your corner is really, really important. And I guess the third one, and I would say the most important, is that kind of idea of being empathetic. So, you know, when we looked at what agencies were experiencing, and obviously BIMA has quite a diverse agency community, it was so diverse. It was, I think 27% said that they were looking to make redundancies, but then we had over 40% looking to hire. Someone I spoke to yesterday said that they'd had both their worst month and their best month this year, which is just crazy. But when we looked at clients and what they were saying, so yes, of course, revenues are, you know, vary massively depending on which sector you were in, etc. But actually we saw budgets slashed pretty much across the board. So I think over 70% of clients we surveyed said they had at least a 25% reduction in budget. So I think probably as a result, you know, a lot of these clients are changing their marketing strategy. I think over 44% changing their marketing strategy, 36% changing their business model entirely. 90%, this is probably pretty obvious, changing their ways of working. So they are all going through these massive changes. And I think what they really need is agencies to listen to them, you know, to be flexible, to be proactive. So there was a lot about, you know, yes, it's about value and point of difference, but it's really about ROI and helping them to, you know, find that ROI and you know, support the business case across the rest of the, you know, the rest of the business. So, you know, so they're supporting that case for the work that you know, you want them to do. So yeah, I think really listen to people and make sure that, you know, you're presenting them with something that's going to really add value to their business at this time when they are facing so much change and upheaval. So yeah, I think, as I said, there's tons more stuff in it, but those were, for me, the kind of key points.
Yeah, no, and I'd be really interested to see what gets carried through, you know, to next year, and sort of what goes out the window a little bit. You know, I know this obviously, you know, that empathy and everything and adjusting, it's been so important in terms of survival, and it's just, you know, trying to, you know, we can maybe get into that a bit later, but thinking about what's going to last the test of time. Okay, cool. No, all good stuff. So yeah, do download that the State of Digital industry report from BIMA. And then, so if we jump into you, Adam, you did a sort of, was it an annual survey report, as you know, that you looked at?
Yes. Hi everyone. We at the DBA we do an annual financial survey, and I will share a few pages. The report is exclusive to members, but there are some bits that I can pull out. The survey was done in May and June, so at the height of all the uncertainty. But what we were looking for was how people thought about the state of their business at that time. So every year we ask a confidence-based question: how's business? And what we've done in the report was track it back over previous years. So you can see that immediately following the referendum back in 2016, there was a big spike in people who were concerned about their business, those who thought they're just going to break even. And then compare that with this year. What's quite interesting is that we still have quite a few agencies up at the top here who felt that business was great and growing. Obviously, ones working in branding, packaging for food and drink, those type of businesses. But this section down here, those who are concerned about their business and tightening their belts, obviously massive increase down there. We also ask about expected income and staffing levels. We also a lot of existing income as well. So all the financials are all based on financial years that have just ended. So the financials in the report were all looking really good, because last year wasn't too bad for the design sector. But when everyone was starting to look forward, there was big increase in how many agencies felt that they were going to see a 10% or more drop in their income, and also those who felt that they were going to lose at least 10% of their staff. Normally, these figures are way down. And in fact, when people are projecting, normally it's practically close to zero. The confidence levels were quite interesting when we dug down into the data. What I particularly found interesting were the proportion of agencies who were more confident in the regions as opposed to London. So this area here are agencies who gave a score of between 50 and 75%, and 50 would be neutral. Anything above that is positive, below is negative. And as you can see, the regional agencies doing quite well, and there might be some issue there around London-based agencies being saddled with expensive premises, and how they can manage that, and also getting their staff into the office is a lot more complicated than those outside of London. And then the final one I was going to share as well. So the financials, as I mentioned, we don't normally share this, but one of the things that I thought was really positive about the year is that actually when people were looking back at the last year, their income per head had actually increased from the previous year, which was at 82. The average income per head for DBA members had gone up to 87, and that includes freelancer costs as well, and that's across the country as a whole. Whereas for agencies in London, we recommend that you should be getting over 100,000 per head. But when we spread it across the whole country and include a lot of really small micro agencies, it does bring it down a bit. But that was a positive on this year. It would be interesting to see how this changes for next year.
Do you think that was about efficiency, really? Cutting costs and?
Well, because that was based on financials that they had submitted till about April in 2020. So their financials up to that point had been doing really well for the year before. They had been getting really good work in. They managed to increase charge out rates slightly over the past year as well, and salaries hadn't increased as much as charge out rates. So when all that was worked out, it looked like agencies were actually starting to make slightly more profit. Yeah, this year, because we run this every year, we will be asking exactly the same questions next year, and we'll be able to see the full impact. A lot of our members seem to have actually broke even this year or made a small profit, but that's mainly due to all the cost cuttings that they've done.
Yeah. No, it's good. Well, we'll have to get you back on next year to share some of the latest insights. Okay, great. Well, that's all good stuff. So I'll come to you, Stephen, if that's all right. And I don't think you've got any stats to share, but you're going to give us some headlines about some of the research you've been doing. Oh, you're on mute. I don't know. You knew that.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with all the views and obviously the evidence that's been shown so far. I think broadly speaking, it's a game of two halves in the sense that there's a number of different disciplines within agencies, a number of agencies within disciplines that have done rather well, particularly obviously in the digital side, on the development side. We've also seen quite significant increases obviously in social, paid social, content, right across the board in those areas. I think we've all witnessed, obviously, that experiential and events agencies have really struggled, even though they have managed to move their business into the virtual environment in many instances. They're just not getting the same level of revenue from having, the virtual versus the physical events. And I think other businesses, video production really did suffer early on because you just weren't able to basically produce any live action. So everything, swapped very quickly towards animation or repurposing existing content. That there will be some real key learnings, I think. I mean, all the agencies that we work with, and that we work with, over 200 agencies now across the whole of the UK, they're all in the independent sector. And one of the things about the independent sector is that they are able to move and change their proposition very rapidly. They're able to reflect what clients want. Their cost base is somewhat lower. They are better equipped to deal with the downturns in the economy than some of the groups might be. And the way in which the groups have responded to cutting costs has been to reduce the number of agencies by pushing agencies together, creating merged agencies in the name of what clients want, but in reality they're reacting to the market condition. And it's any way they can reduce their overheads is to lose people, push agencies together, reduce their carbon footprint, reduce the number of offices they've got, and they've been doing that reasonably successfully, and they've had to do it fairly swiftly. The independent category, I think, is actually thriving and is doing pretty well. I'm not saying it's bonanza out there, because the reality is clients are overall spending less, but it would appear they're spending more with the independent sector, and they're looking to find new solutions to the ways in which they work going forward. And the whole period of time that we've been orientating and working from home has proven the model. And I think that's going to be something as we move forward. I don't think agencies will want to rush back into offices. I think they want more flexibility. People, obviously, the younger fraternity will still want to continue to have flexibility to go into the office, and they need that. And they need to be able to feed off other people, learn from other people. And frankly, one of the reasons we all work is because we enjoy it. We need that. But I think that some of the flexibility and some of the ways in which we've learned to work will remain. And I see that as a very positive step as we move into 2021. So cost bases are down as a reduction in headcount. Profit levels in many of the agencies we work with are there or thereabouts compared to what they earned this time last year. I think there will be, I'm afraid to say, a further reduction in overheads. I still feel that there's likely to be a further tightening. Some agencies have recognised they've probably been carrying too many people, and actually the quality of the service they've been delivering to their clients actually hasn't been evidenced in any way, shape or form. So, that's what tends to happen. When business is fairly good, when things are basically stable, you tend to take on more overhead. And sometimes, of course, it's not always the case that you need all those people. Coupled with the fact, obviously, that technology will actually increasingly have an impact on all of our businesses. And a lot of those jobs that have been done in the past can now be done by robots and so on. That sort of dystopian nightmare is not going to happen quickly. But we had, interestingly enough, a presentation from 3 of our agencies in the AI space 2 weeks ago, and some of their insights and some of the things they were talking about were really exciting, because they free us up to actually have more time to think and more time to do than was in the past by AI automation in general. So I'm quite excited about the future. I'm looking forward to 2021. I think there's things that we can build on, lessons that we can learn from 2020 and take forward. And I'm really hopeful that the independent sector in particular is going to thrive in this environment, due to flexibility and the fact they can accommodate and work with smaller budgets. So it's not all bad news, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And I think a lot of people are seeing that trend. I was at least seeing that trend even before COVID. And I think, like with a lot of things, it feels like COVID just sped everything up really quickly to get us over the line. But actually, you know, people were moving away from cities, independent agencies were on the rise. You know, these things were sort of happening, and the networks were struggling. You know, even going back a couple of years. So yeah, again, it'd be, you know, interesting to see what remains after this year. And then, so Amanda, if we come to you then, last but not least, and just you know, I think, have you done any particular research, or you know, is it just kind of like, you know, ad hoc things that you're aware of that you've come across?
Well, a bit of both, really. So ALF did do a survey with its users during the first lockdown, basically with an aim of understanding how people in new business felt, and, you know, how their jobs essentially were changing. And we did get a sense of that. So probably to kind of echo some of the things that Holly mentioned. So more on the doom and gloom part, 89% of our respondents agreed that clients were not spending and less likely to spend in the period. And quite a big percentage, 68%, actually stressed that they were really worried about their job and how this was all going to impact their progression within their careers. It wasn't all negative though, because what we did also get was a sense of how people are adapting. And that's something I think we've all seen, you know, once we've started getting on with it, people are adapting to new ways of working. So 91% of our survey respondents said that they have changed their sales pitch and their messaging, which you would expect. And I'd probably echo things like empathy, which we mentioned earlier, and sensitivity. But, you know, I think everybody's had to kind of reflect on what that pitch actually is. And 66% are now targeting brands that traditionally were not on their radar. And that's something we've definitely felt at ALF. You know, we're a business development tool helping people get in front of brands. And we've seen a growing need for, you know, quick access to things like D2C brands. For example, we've seen a reduction in sections like travel and obvious areas where traditionally they've been, you know, high sought out kind of categories. So I think it's made everybody kind of reflect and say, okay, well, what other areas can we be working on if our own, you know, traditional key sectors have been damaged? I mean, when we asked, about a third of our clients did say that they've reduced their new business activity and their marketing. Now, this was in that first lockdown period. And I think we definitely felt that at ALF, kind of two camps forming. There was the camp that was, you know, we need to batten down the hatches. We need to concentrate on our existing client base and keep those safe. And, you know, now is not the time for new business. The market's not right for it. And then we had this other camp of people that was actually like, do you know, we need to overcompensate here. We need to go full flog and get our pipeline in shape. And
which one is the right one?
I would definitely say the latter there. But you know, every this is different for every business depending on what you do. So in some circumstances, you know, that may have been the right option to slow down and stop. But, you know, I think particularly in our world, things take time. So if you're going to go on hiatus for a year, that's going to have a much longer impact for you. But you know, that's kind of what the feeling was in lockdown. And I think at least initially, we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. So as an immediate reflection, I mean, we even did it at ALF. I'd put a lot of my new business team on furlough and then had to call them back a week and a half later because of that immediate reaction of, you know, what's the market's going to stop, and then suddenly realizing actually no, there is, you know, there's work to be done here. And then finally, an interesting kind of point of view from a sales perspective is we wanted to understand how the sales channels had actually, change. So you've got your whole market working from home. How can you actually get in contact with prospects now, and how should you be getting in front of them? And the reaction there was a bit of an overwhelming feeling that you can't get people on the phone anymore. And interestingly, when I have conversations with people about this, again, it seems like there are two arguments. It's no, people are far more willing to pick up their mobile to me, but actually getting through switchboards and things like that is a bit more tricky. The same with email. About half of our respondents said that they were really struggling, getting attention of people via email. However, that hasn't stopped people trying to use it more. Video is an obvious one, so I won't talk about that too much, but it's worth mentioning before COVID, when we've done these surveys in the past, about 75% of our ALF users conduct all their meetings in person. So it is a major difference having to change over to video, and that changes the way we all work in new business quite considerably. And then finally, another pretty obvious one was the increase in LinkedIn usage. So 75% of our users said that they're using LinkedIn far more than what they used to. And I think that's a reflection of all the additional content that we've been seeing this year on platforms like LinkedIn, and those struggles via the main communication channels that we're used to using. But ultimately, the majority of people working in new business are still hammering away. I think it just shows that they've just had to adapt and get on with it, and we're just working in a slightly different way now.
Yeah, and I mean, those stats don't massively, surprise me. And I think it's interesting because people are always looking for sort of blanket results or answers or what works, what doesn't. And I just think, like when you talked about whether or not to pick up the phone to somebody, I think every individual, we're all different, right? And you might call one person and they might be so annoyed that you've called them on their mobile and they're at home, like with their kids, and how dare you call me? You might call another person and think, great, actually, like I've got time to speak. And so there's no sort of blanket rule for business development like that. And, it's interesting, Holly, you obviously represent a lot of digital agencies. And you said some of them had their best months ever, but, digital was kind of booming this year. And I think the investment in digital is not going to slow down. And, I don't know with you, Adam, for design, maybe that's struggled a little bit more. Like we know with events agencies have obviously struggled, but it's kind of where the priority is right now for businesses, isn't it? So cool. Thank you for that. I know a couple more people have joined, and that's mainly because I think we screwed up with one of the links that we sent round. So kind of few more people joined. The good news is that we recorded everything, so we'll share it, and you can catch up on the first half an hour that you missed. And if you've got any questions, obviously, just put them into the chat function as well below. And I might launch a poll that can kind of run in the background as well in a minute. But let's kick off with a question. So I know all of you guys kind of run, communities and or memberships. So kind of how have you maintained that sort of dialogue throughout this year and sort of keeping a lot of these agencies going?
Who would you like to answer? I can go. I think, I'm sure everyone else on the panel has witnessed this as well. Like obviously the demand and engagement is kind of skyrocketed. I think a mixture of people really wanting to connect and share when they're at home and stressed and they don't know what's happening, particularly at the beginning. I think we've seen a lot of people really wanting to upskill especially in digital areas, obviously, D2C e-commerce, productizing AI, all of these sorts of, new ways of growing their business. I think we've also seen a lot of people kind of more invested in the bigger picture. So we've seen more demand for the stuff we do on sustainability, on inclusion and diversity. Obviously, these things have been really front of mind for lots of different reasons over the last sort of 6-10 months. And so that's been amazing to see. And it's just easier, I think, it is a hell of a lot easier than trekking across London. And for us, you know, we're UK wide. So pre-COVID, we had, you know, physical activity going on in 7-8 cities. So to be able to produce a load of sessions and masterclasses and hangouts and content that's for everyone has been amazing, and it kind of feels like it's brought everyone together. I think, you know, the question about how have we changed, I think, you know, Amanda, you were kind of talking about it. It's like the people that just got stuck in, and it sounds like, you know, all of our organizations kind of did that. And it was, you know, we ran a session, I think, on the first day of lockdown, probably a finance, coronavirus and you. It sounds like loads of fun now, but and I think in those first 6 weeks we pretty much ran a session a day, because that's what people needed and wanted at the time. I think, you know, we found it really interesting to kind of build on our existing programs that deliver on all of those things, so connecting, upskilling, bigger picture stuff, but then also created new ones off the back of this year. So we have these brilliant peer networks, of which you said you were co-chairing one of them, that have really come off the back of this. They've come off the back of people really wanting to connect with their peers, you know, Chatham House rules, and to learn from that, what is a pretty diverse, you know, range of leaders or new biz or HR or whoever they are. And that's been amazing to see that grow so quickly. You'd think people have less time, you know, with kids and, you know, like, you know, all the extra work they've had to do with people on furlough, but it feels like they've found the time, they've invested more time into this stuff, into the community part of what we all do, which has been amazing. I'll stop now.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, obviously I can only talk from this development perspective, but certainly like learning, there feels like a real desire for everyone to learn and improve, you know, what they're doing. Yeah, I know I've certainly seen that. What about the rest of you guys? I mean, obviously you've all I don't know if you've got plans to bring back, you know, physical events. Is there any sort of, is anyone that being that daring? Oh yeah, Stephen's not.
Has anyone got one booked in? Is that...
We've done a poll amongst our members the last couple of weeks to find out how soon they think we'll be in a position to go back and have physical events. And we're also trying to plan our conference for next year, which obviously sadly this year we had to postpone. I'm working on the assumption that we will be able to get physical, as it were, from sort of June of next year. We could possibly go earlier, but I think it's going to be about confidence too. I think people will want to have the confidence of going back into an environment where there's going to be lots of people. And a lot of our events, you know, we were in a tight confined space at places like Number 1 Alfred Place. We got 100 people in there, so it was tight. So we've learned from the program this year, and we've, I think, probably promoted or delivered or produced just over 300 events. And we've done that in hand in glove with the Alliance of Independent Agencies and with the PRCA and with our members, you know, including Adam, who's on this call, and others. And the feedback we've had from these things has been fantastic. I mean, people really do value being part of a community when they're in that situation. They all want to feel like they're, you know, sharing the pain and getting knowledge and insights from other people in the same situation. I don't see that it's going to change. So I'm anticipating that we'll continue with our virtual and physical events next year. It reaches a broader audience. Not everybody can come to the physical events because they tend to be held at the end of the day, early evening. So sometimes, obviously, for parents, it's quite difficult to get to those things. So there will be a continuous mix of different activities. The real challenge for all of us is to actually, how do you stay original? How can you, you know, deal with this medium we're on now? How can we make it more involving, more creative, more engaging? And how can we give a voice to all the people that we work with? So that's a physical challenge and a mental challenge, because you know, putting on these activities, it just doesn't happen. If you want to get good people, and you want, as Adam knows, you know, you've got to promote the hell out of it, and you've got to also give people a reason to join and come along. So my view is, I think we're going to get better at using this medium. I think we'll find new ways to get engagement and higher levels of participation, but ultimately people are busy, you know, so the fact that, you know, that they're equally as likely to watch this on catch up So we promoted and put all of our activities onto YouTube, and we're getting good viewing on that. But at the heart of it, it was all about helping people, making sure we put the resources in place, having the professional service people to talk about HR, finance, legal, all the things that they needed at the time, and then having all those resources available on the blog and as backup. And the other really interesting thing was we didn't do this for our members, we did this for the whole of the market. So we said, anybody who needs help at this time, agencies, large, small, one-man bands, one-woman bands, and consultants, the whole lot, we're in this together. So that's work and support each other. And I have to say, all the associations have been brilliant. They really have. In the past, I think some of the associations have been fairly competitive. What I've really seen is the coming together, and the fact they've all been willing to pitch in, help and support. We've had the Advertising Association, we've had the BPIF, which is an organisation ordinarily that our community wouldn't embrace, but they represent the print and to a certain extent the digital community. We've had the CDI, we've had DMA, we've had the Alliance themselves, and many more. And they've all been great. And so, I'd like to publicly thank them. But we're going to need more of it next year, because next year is going to be as tough in some respects as this year. And we've got both Brexit and the recession to deal with, and the ending of the COVID period. So it's another challenge, it's another opportunity.
Keep it positive, keep moving. No, I think, look, and it's been amazing what Pimento have done this year as well. And like all of you guys, I think the way you've kept these communities going and everyone, connected, and at a time it's been so hard, I think it's been admirable. I think it's been fantastic. And so let's just delving into sort of some of like culture and mental health challenges that some of these agencies have had. I don't know, Adam, have you seen like, a lot of struggles in that area? How agencies, any examples how agencies have really managed to get on top of that, or can get on top of that if there's still problems of sort of isolation or feeling overwhelmed?
Yep, absolutely. Culture is so rooted in the sense of place and belonging, and then straight away people are just dispersed over such a wide area and isolated at the same time. That to agencies looking to maintain that culture, it all comes down to communication. And those agencies that had a leader whose role was already based around the communication side of things, about making sure that everyone else in the agency was optimizing their role as opposed to them doing the work as well. So it's the distinction between those agencies where the leader is also doing the work as opposed to helping everyone else do the work. So those agencies that had the leader who was like the ringmaster, I think those have fared better, because suddenly that has become key, because they got all these staff dispersed over an area, and their role has been to make sure that they can do their job and to hold everyone together. And that constant communication, one-to-ones, group meetings. Everyone's been having the team meetings on Zoom, and the quizzes and the Friday night drinks, and trying to keep morale up. But at the end of the day, the culture can only come from the person leading the agency, and them having those one-to-one calls, showing concern, and putting their arm around them virtually.
It's a lot easier if you're smaller and independent. If you've got a couple of hundred staff, that's a lot of phone calls to make.
It is, and I mean, our membership covers all types of agencies, so we cover all sectors and all sizes. So I mean, we had Tim Greenhouse from Landor and Fitch on one of our webinars, and he was saying that's basically what he's doing. He is spending so much time with small groups of people, with one-on-one, just trying to nurture them and move them along. But yes, the vast majority of our members are in that kind of under 10 people side, and that's easier to maintain. But when you're also trying to do the work as well, that's tough. But yeah, I mean, we've had some great examples of everyone being sent little packages, and then having team building events on Zoom. But I think really it comes down from that personal relationship with the person running the business, and the individual at home feeling valued, and that's how you maintain the culture.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's leaders often get sometimes too overwhelmed with doing the work, get too sucked into some of the client work and everything, and forget that actually their job is more that what you're saying is to lead from the front and morale and have a vision and drive people behind it. Not necessarily, be there to sort of pick up all the problems that are going on within the clients and everything else. So Amanda, I don't know, you talked a little bit about survival strategies and things and what people were doing. I'd be interested to see what people are thinking, or if you're seeing any trends, like are people starting to sort of target travel brands, thinking that hopefully it's coming back and maybe there's some movement there, or what? Any sort of tips or ideas about how people can sort of survive the Q1 next year?
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that that kind of travel sector, because of course these are not sectors that have disappeared completely. Anyone that was working in those areas know that there will be business to be had in the future. And it's probably not the best idea just to completely write them off mentally, and actually, particularly if that's a common theme in your pipeline, keep maintaining those conversations and really understanding, what's going on with them. I think in terms of what we've seen, I mentioned the D2C aspect, and we've seen many non-D2C brands trying to become D2C brands, and I expect that's probably something that will stick for quite a while. But I also think what's interesting to see is just that how agencies are looking at new sectors in general. So well-established agencies that have their key areas that they've continued to work in, and how they're just flipping the script and looking at new types of organizations to target. And particularly one thing that we've also seen is an interest in maybe smaller spending brands and advertisers, and new entrants to market. We've seen before in previous recessions, often to come out of that, new organizations. There are still product launches going on. There's still lots of activity to be had, but it's maybe not as much of a fight over just the largest spending advertisers in the market, but actually looking at the market more as a whole. And I think that work that's been done by agencies, trying to identify new spaces to work in, is definitely been a good way to go, and we'll put them in a good place for the future.
And I also presume with the rise of sort of independence, as Stephen said, I think maybe that's going to create an even more competitive space for business development, because you've just got more agencies, you've got one-man bands all going up, all going after the same thing, which is going to be tough. So it's all about kind of, propositions standing out, trying to sort of differentiate themselves.
I think what's interesting is that, there is a certain level playing field that's been created. We've taken our nice fancy offices out of the equation. We've taken pitch theatre out of the equation. And everybody's got to kind of start from the same starting point. So it will be really interesting to see, how that can affect the new business process and what wins are in the future because of that.
We've definitely seen with our brands community that their attitudes have changed, or actually maybe it was there and now they're able to actually act on it, but they're much more interested in working with much smaller agencies, one man woman bands, and actually it's so much more about the output, as opposed to any of those other things. Having said that, you also talk to people that really miss the pitch theatre. They really miss going to agencies and having coffees before and after and all of that good stuff. So, but it does feel like there's a change that's taken place, where, as you say, everyone's on slightly more equal playing field.
Yeah, I think it's agency models sort of changing, isn't it? And sort of what they're looking for at the moment. And I mean, what have you seen any other sort of trends around that, in terms of what brands are sort of how they've responded, or sort of what they're looking for from agencies at the moment?
I think they're looking for flexibility. So I think the kind of revenue models, quite interesting one. I don't know whether everyone else is seeing that. I haven't seen it a lot, but there's been some examples of where, you know, people have gone in either, you know, multiple agency partnerships or company partnerships to deliver some things, whereas that wouldn't have happened before, or where they've gone in getting a percentage of kind of revenue, you know, sharing IP on a product. And I know this stuff was kind of happening beforehand, but it feels like it's happening a little bit more now.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, I think maybe that's where agencies need to be a bit more commercially savvy, because I don't necessarily think that they always are, you know, in terms of we're looking to always get paid for every minute that we work. And actually maybe there's bigger opportunities here in terms of how agencies price, how they look at the value, how they commercialize themselves, how they package themselves up. I think we're still quite basic, isn't it? You know, it's like, oh, you want this, or you know, here's my shopping list, 3 hours of him, 2 hours of that. It's, you know, that's been going on for years. I think media agencies are probably the most savvy at doing things like that, from my experience in the past. Adam, did you have something to share?
Yeah, and I think that's the case as well in the design sector. The hourly rate kind of carries on, but there are more and more agencies that are using that in the background to work out their basic profit margin, and then not sharing that sort of detail with the client. They're trying to understand the value that they can bring to the client, and then and charge accordingly. But yes, lots of other revenue models as well around equity, and especially with startups. But that can also be quite problematic if things don't work and you don't have a watertight contract in place. But from the client's perspective, I think those agencies who have embedded the virtual model into their business are the ones that are doing the best at the moment. Not the ones who are trying to do exactly what they were doing before, but from home. Those who have actually shifted, and it's going to be more embedded in the way they work going forward. So we have quite a few members in the membership who are already virtual agencies before COVID. So they have like 3 or 4 partners, or without an office, and they manage freelancers around the world. So they do quite large projects for quite large clients, but really they're an agency of 3 or 4 people. And I think that kind of model, where you can prove to clients that you are able to do the work and do it effectively, will get more and more common as we go through this, especially as with all the redundancies we're getting, all those people made redundant. Most of them are going to be setting up their own agencies, I would have thought.
We see that all the time. You know, so many freelancers just go, well, I'll just go and do it myself. But I think so it's sort of a mindset thing in terms of being agile and how you can work collectively. But I think a lot of people go into that possibly naively. I think when people think like, oh, I can do a job, I'm a designer, or I'm a developer, or I'm a this. And I think putting the strain back on like the business development side of the brain and what people need to be able to sort of deliver there, it's a lot. You know, you've got to find leads, you've got to find that work constantly, you've got to build your network, and some don't feel very comfortable sort of doing that. So it's an interesting one how that will change. What did you say? I've got a poll here that I'm just going to chuck out now, because we've got about 5-10 minutes left, but just really a bit of fun there, to be honest. That I thought we'd just get a feeling for what everyone's up to.
Never.
I always find it interesting. Holly, I know you're in pajamas most calls we have, so don't. The productivity one's interesting. I mean, like, have you guys felt more productive working from home, or have you
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I live quite a way out of London, so I only ever used to go in the office 2 days a week anyway. But that was over 2 hours each way, and get home late, not see the kids.
I think I've changed. I thought I was more productive at the beginning, but now I feel I'm less productive, especially with like builders going on in the background and all sorts of stuff. But no, I definitely don't feel like I'm as productive as I used to be. I've just got those results coming back in.
I think it's different, isn't it? I feel like I'm in your camp, Adam. But I know that if you're in your 20s, sorry, I'm making an assumption, but that it's not, you know, it's a very, very different thing, you know, having a house and kids and maybe a garden, you know, all of those things, maybe having to travel in, all of that stuff. But if you're in a, you know, if you're in a shared house or even living with your parents, it's a very different experience. So I think the office is a really important place for young people to learn their trade and be social and you know, all the rest of it. So there's definitely a place for it.
It's quite interesting when you look at basic rental values and property values. So central London, obviously rent has fallen, property values have fallen, but just outside of central London, you know, at the end of the line, as it were, we've seen a sort of 4.5% increase in rents and a similar increase in values there. And if you go to the home counties, it goes up again. So the days I think of working and being close to the office, I think there's going to be a divergence here. I think, as you rightly say, Holly, I think if you're perhaps more mature like myself and you've got, you know, I've got a grown-up family now, but the reality is not having to go into London, not having to go to a major city, being able to actually enjoy working from home more, actually be more productive as a result of which I think is certainly on trend. But equally too, all the reasons I went into advertising, none of them had anything to do with money, the fame. It was all about having fun. And I think that actually not being able to your colleagues, have some fun, you know, go for a beer after work, all those sorts of things that are really, really important. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere, the reality of being able to do that is somewhat more challenging. So I suppose the good news is that if rents are falling in central London, then the kids will be able to actually, once again, hopefully afford to live nearer to the office. And so therefore that sense of community and that sense of belonging will continue in some way, shape or form, albeit the office as we know it, I think will physically change. But there is still going to be a requirement for us old ones to actually somehow contribute to that existence and make sure that we are giving the guidance and support and learning from them as well as them learning from us. So it's tricky, isn't it? It really is going to be difficult to manage time and location, I think, as we move forward.
What about your thoughts on the sort of 4-day week and things like that? I feel like, you know, that was all coming in. A lot of people were talking about that, but now it feels like with flexible working, it's just about letting people work in their own time, their own hours.
Yeah, we actually had Alex Pang do a webinar for us during the summer, and he's the author of Shorter, which is the how-to guide on businesses moving to a four-day week. And that was fascinating, but it's about working smarter essentially. And we've got a couple of our members are mentioned in his book who use that 4-day week. But it always makes me think back to, well, not think back because I wasn't there, but the 1950s. Future gazers all thought that by now we'd be working 3 days a week because technology would have taken all that work away from us and we'd have far more free time, and we're not. So I think it comes down to that personal choice of working smarter and actually putting in barriers and saying, actually, this is work time and this isn't. And there've been several agencies who've managed that 4-day week really well, and the transition period where they start talking to the clients and saying, actually on a Friday we're not going to be here, and how you manage that relationship with them to try and claw back some of that time to enable you to think more or just relax, and that will enable you to be better for those 4 days. I'm a strong advocate, but I'm not sure the DBA will be going there any day soon.
Fair enough. What about, so, you know, obviously just to wrap up then in terms of sort of, you know, maybe the biggest sort of learning from this year or something that what you would like people to take forward, you know, for next year. Any thoughts and advice on, you know, either the biggest challenge they're going to face or something that you think that people should really take with them into 2021?
Who wants to go first, Holly?
I think I've been first far too much this hour.
I'll just say one thing, and I think the one thing we've learned is that actually you trust your people. You know, I think that the fact that actually people have actually been able to adapt and actually work in difficult environments and deliver still. You know, for years and years, this notion that we had to have command and control and have people sitting in desks or working in an environment, that's gone. And I think actually people have demonstrated that actually if they're committed to their jobs, they can be trusted, they can be incredibly productive. So I think, you know, we should celebrate that achievement, because I think that's the most exciting thing that's come out of this year. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, from a new business kind of front, it's always a benefit when you can just stop and take stock of the way you do things and how to improve. And I think often this year has kind of forced a lot of people to do that, just kind of look on how they operate and how they work and you know who they want to be in the future from a new business perspective. So I would definitely say that we've seen some really great examples of people adapting and changing the way that they work for the better. And if you're an agency that doesn't think that they've done that, now is definitely the time to, you know, have a look at all of your new business clogs in the machine, and, you know, kind of get with the program for next year.
And I would say really work on keeping your staff motivated, because that deadline that everyone's talking about of March, April, whenever, it's not going to be March or April. I think Stephen's right when he's talking about June, July. It's going to keep pushing back, and that can be really demoralizing. So just keep a further end line in mind, and keep your staff going, keep them motivated.
I would say, I guess we now know that we can't predict the future. You know, that's not going to happen. The days of like 3 to 5 year plans are kind of gone. And that means people are thinking quite short term and making incremental improvements, I guess. And actually, like, don't let that fact stop you thinking big and making big change. And, you know, think about, you know, what's meaningful and useful to your audience and to your clients. And yeah, not just thinking about the small changes, but yeah, think big.
Thank you. No, great. I think I agree. I think expect the unexpected. I think it's, you know, I think we have to sort of learn to live in a flux of uncertainty. And I even wrote this sort of in my Movember blog when I was looking at sort of mental health and things. And it's kind of like, we can't predict the future, and we sort of always want to put these processes and systems in place. And as humans, I think we're programmed to do that. We have to organize things, and it just doesn't work like that. You know, things can go out the window, like, you know, tomorrow. So I think you've just got to be prepared for that, both like mentally and from a sort of operational perspective in agency land. I mean, as a new business person, I think that becomes more natural because we're constantly having to adapt every single day. Something different could happen, and we have to sort of change our propositions or things to sort of meld with that. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenging year, but hopefully a lot of learnings and some positive things we can take into next year. I think if I click share the results, can you see those poll results?
Yes.
So most people never wear pajamas, Holly, but joking. Apologies also if you're just joining. I think there was a bit of a mix up with the time, and all of this has been recorded. So we'll share it all on sort of our YouTube and send out a link. So you won't have missed anything. Yeah, a bit of a mix there between business on top, PJs on the bottom. That's my area. Most people feel more productive, really 86%. I'm surprised by that. Most people feel more productive working from home, or working from, didn't actually say home, but, you know, presumes interpretation. But yeah, I thought there would have been a bit more of a balance there. Like, I can't wait to get back into the office, but, you know, everyone's different. 17% of people have gone to the toilet during a Zoom call. Wow, that's something nobody needed to know. But people cooking lunch or dinner. I mean, it's certainly, well, maybe that's the productivity people were referring to. What type of Zoomer are you? The one who always talks got the most. I do find it hard to read body language and things, and like just knowing when to shut up, and and also I had a call yesterday where someone kept trying to talk, but they had worse internet signal than the other person, so it was just, and you couldn't hear anything they were saying, right? It was just over the top. So they couldn't get a word in edgeways, which probably wouldn't happen in a face-to-face environment. And then, I think that's the other thing that really gets me, the multitasking. Like how many times do we on a call, but we flicked over, or we've got something running in the background, and we've got 15 million tabs open. It's like, can we really be that focused and productive when we're online and there's too many distractions around us? But anyway, all things to think about. Cool. I don't know if anyone's got any quick questions farther now, but I know we're sort of come to an end. Stephen, did you have any tips on a virtual Christmas? Or do you have anything you want to share?
We did an article we stuck out last week on social about some of the things you might want to do with your colleagues to find novel ways to kind of come together in the absence of Christmas parties, and that's a reasonable amount of hits. What we decided to do, we were going to have a small Christmas event and try and do it in 2 locations, groups of 6, but of course that's now obviously forbidden even outside. So what we're doing is we found this character down in Burgoyne, who's a sommelier who works for a fantastic wine grower down there, Chateau Pommard. And he's basically sent, and it sounds terribly expensive, but it isn't. He's sent 3 bottles of wine to each of our members of the team, and we're going to do a virtual wine tasting from Chateau Pommard on the 16th. The team just has to provide the sort of cheese and biscuits, as it were, but that should be quite fun. And it's actually considerably less expensive than doing but it should be just as much fun, I hope. But yeah, those sorts of things. You have to find a way, to the earlier comment, find a way to embrace and continue to support your colleagues, and find ways to make sure that mental health and also how many people have actually hired people in this period, and actually how do you actually communicate your vision, your values, and what you're about as an organization and your culture. So much more difficult to do, isn't it, online than it is actually face to face. So any tips in that area would also be helpful.
Yeah, I think we've certainly been stretched sort of creatively and I think people need to. We're going to have to think more creatively in how we embrace these channels, how we bring people together, and what we can do. Anyone else can better the sommelier and the wine tasting? It's pretty good, to be fair.
Do that and then switch your laptop off and don't turn it on for a good few days. Would be my advice.
Yes, we're downing tools for 2 weeks. I think it's really important to get a break over Christmas. And I mean, a virtual Christmas is it's an impossibility. So I think everyone should just accept that it's going to be a bit rubbish this year, and then just look forward to a time when we can socialize, go to the theatre, go to the cinema, celebrate the arts, give your grandparents a hug. Just look forward.
But we are all in it together, so that's the main thing. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for sharing sort of loads of really interesting insights and your views this year, and hopefully we can do it again next year, maybe even in person. We'll see.